On today's show, we're bringing it back. The What if questions? What if Wednesday? We're bringing it back for this offseason this summer. It's been our favorite series that we've done over the offseason. And this time we're going to ask a big question about KP.
Should KP have played in the summer league? Would they have won more games? Coming up next.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
Hey, Dallas Mavericks are NBA champions. Bang! Bang! It's good! And the Mavericks have won the game!
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and coordinator for the Locked On Podcast Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, contributor at Mavs.com, the What If Warlock. The one more thinking. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
I'm kind of recovering a little bit. I've been kind of down today. Nick, do you know why I've been down today?
Because it was raining all day and it's just kind of like a dreary day.
Honestly, it's good to see rain right now because it's been so hot. I've just been kind of down because the summer league games are over, and I've enjoyed it so much that I've been kind of sad that we're gonna miss it now.
The Mavericks actually did win their summer league game today, 83-82. Greg St. Jean, nobody played in it. Marui didn't play in this.
Did Greg play?
Nate Hinton left after 9 minutes with a slight injury. Tyrell Terry obviously not playing in it. Josh Green has not been playing in it. Like, nobody was playing in this game that matters for the Mavericks, I think. Carly Jones had 21 points in the game. And then afterwards, Greg St. Jean had a quote that I found really interesting. We'll get into our what if in a little bit. He said, "I'm super proud of our group. They were resilient. They were competitive. They were a few bounces away from going home 3-2. They've been giving everything that I've asked them." Now, it made me ask the question, were they a couple bounces away from being 3-2? They did have a couple overtime games, but there you go. The Mavs Summer League team is done, and we gained no information about the actual Mavs from it, but there's some fun basketball moments there.
Did you learn anything from the Mavs Summer League games at all?
I mean, you learn a little bit about what some of the players were, but like none of the ones that are going to be on the Mavericks, right? Like we didn't really learn anything about Tyrell Terry.
Well,
he looks a little bit bigger. He looks a little bit bigger, a little bit quicker. Amarui, we did learn who Amarui is basically from this, and he's going to be on the two-way. So that was notable, I guess. But besides those two guys, no.
Yeah, okay. I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. Also, big thing that came out was the schedule. We know the Mavericks are going to be probably starting their season, but definitely starting their national TV season October 21st, which is 64 days from today, which is Wednesday, August 18th. If you're listening to this, watching this on Wednesday. So 64 days from now, the Mavericks will play at the Atlanta Hawks, 6:30 p.m. Central Time, Dallas, Texas time. I'm looking forward to that matchup. I like that they're starting with some of these spicy ones early.
Heck yeah, man. A lot of fun. You know, that opening week, NBA released the national TV schedule for the opening week. And so a lot of good games across the board. Starts on a Tuesday night. This Mavs, at Hawks is on a Thursday night. So, yeah, I mean, this is what we all wait for. So I think coming up probably in the next few weeks, we'll probably predict the win and loss record for the Mavs. Every single game will tell you if the Mavericks will win or lose.
Can you imagine?
What if
we did that?
This has been a running joke for 5 years now for us.
That's true, hasn't it?
For us, you will never get that pod because it's one of our pet peeves because you can never predict wins or losses.
The Mavericks will also play on Christmas Day. Christmas coming time. Christmas time is here.
Well, okay, I do got a question. Since they're playing on Christmas Day, does that mean they have to run sprints on Christmas Day?
9:30 p.m. Dallas, Texas time at Utah. It's a bad city, but they're going to spend Christmas in it.
Kids calling it, "Hey, Adam, can we get the day off on Christmas because we got to practice?"
So, yeah, that's the Mavericks. 2 games that we know so far of the schedule. Those are both pretty interesting ones. I'm glad that they're not playing the Clippers on either of those days. Potentially the season opener and then also Christmas Day. I thought that was was notable, and I'm glad that it's not the Clippers.
I will say this. I do think it's kind of cheap that the MVP of the league is not playing on Christmas. Jokic just won MVP, and the fact that he's not playing on Christmas is kind of messed up, to be honest. So,
yeah, that was a little bit weird. And then, I mean, they're really pushing the Lakers Warriors matchups like that, and like neither of those teams are really technically like barely even in the playoffs last year. So that's a weird thing, but you get it, right? It's all about marketing and about the fan base and all that kind of stuff. So, all right, let's get into our what if. What if Kristaps Porzingis was never traded to the Dallas Mavericks? What if the Dallas Mavericks never pulled the trigger, or the Knicks were gun shy about it? They decided not to make the trade and actually trade for him. There's so many different angles for this, Isaac.
Oh man, about a million. We joked right before we hit record, like, hey, there's so many different trails we could go down. So yeah, we've been doing these what if pods for the past 4 off seasons, and 4 off seasons, 5 off. Is this our 5th off season or 4th off season?
So we started in May 2017. So that was technically an off season that we did it, that we started. So yeah, this is a 5th one.
5th off season. We've been doing these what if Wednesdays, and we basically just take a situation that happened. Typically, majority of the time, it happens in the past. Every once in a while, you'll get a what if blank happens in the future, but typically we do a past situation saying, hey, what if this happened? And sometimes it's a bad thing that happens. Sometimes it's a good thing. Like, what if Dallas didn't land? What if they didn't land Luka Doncic? What if they did, Nerlens did accept, the big contract offer, and we just go down all these hypothetical routes. So we'll do this for the next handful of Wednesdays until, honestly, probably media day.
I was going to say, we have like 64 days until an actual game. So,
and they're fun pods for us because it requires a lot of homework too, because we have to go back. We look at the storylines around that offseason, everything. So for the KP thing, if you're looking at big dates, I mean, we joke about it still to this day. It's one of our highest downloaded podcasts to date.
Yeah,
for
sure.
A couple of years, it was when the KP trade happened. When you look at that week, okay, because I think you got to lump in that week as one of the like craziest weeks for the Mavericks in the past, I don't know, like 5 to 10 years, because they trade for Kristaps Porzingis on January 31st. And then 7 days later, on February 6th, they trade Harrison Barnes to the Kings. And it's like mind-boggling moves. We're all recovering from the Porzingis stuff because it happens, basically a week before the trade deadline. Then the Barnes trade happens, which Barnes has been here for a handful of years. We love him,
during a game,
and that was chaotic. But they make the trade for Kristaps Porzingis. He had a situation in New York. We're not. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on like, hey, how he got out of New York and all this stuff. They trade for him. They give him the max contract without him playing a game in Dallas. How would the Mavericks history? How would things have played out for Dallas? Let's just leave Porzingis aside. If Dallas didn't make the KP trade, I think the very first question you have to ask is, does the Harrison Barnes trade happen?
Yes, that was my I think my second question, but yeah.
And I think it does. I think the trade still happens. Even if the Porzingis trade doesn't happen, I think they still trade Harrison Barnes because they wanted flexibility that summer. There were a ton of big names that summer, and trust me, we've heard a lot about the 2019 offseason, and we'll talk more about it later on this podcast. But they wanted flexibility that summer. They wanted to be able to have money to go. I mean, that's basically why they traded Harrison Barnes for Justin Jackson and Zach Randolph, but basically for Justin Jackson. But Harrison Barnes was due $24 million that next season. So you get Justin Jackson. Now you're opening up another $20 million in cap space on top. You just made the Porzingis trade. So even if you didn't make the Porzingis trade and bring in Tim Hardaway and bring in Courtney Lee, I think they still make that move. And then you clear up even more cap space. Like, imagine if they would have that would free up like $60+ million in cap space if they did the Harrison Barnes trade and didn't do the KP Hardaway Courtney.
They could have done the Brooklyn Nets KD and Kyrie thing if they were like, it could have been the team poised to do that. But yeah, there's so many different avenues we want to go down. We got to talk about Dennis Smith Jr. That was a big part of that. Tim Hardaway Jr. has now become a big what if about this, maybe one of the biggest for the Mavericks. And then Where could they have gone if they didn't get Porzingis? They have all these assets all of a sudden ready to make a trade. And I started to look through all the moves that were made in 2019 in the draft, the deadline, the draft, and free agency, and said, all right, what were the stars that were actually available? So we'll get into that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Sweatblock. Sweatblock is a new product that we are sponsoring. They're sponsoring us. It is absolutely incredible. These clinical strength wipes that you can wipe under your underarms the night before, and the next day you will not have pit stains. You will not be dealing with that embarrassing sweat where you don't want to raise your hand over a certain amount, like over your shoulder. You don't want to be wearing certain items of clothing. You won't have to worry about that with Sweatblock. Go to sweatblock.com, use the promo code LOCKEDON. You get 20% off. They have so many other things too. They have deodorant. They have this product called Man Parts. If you're dealing with chafing or anything like that, you can check out this lotion. They also have the deodorant as well that made a special appearance during our live show the other day. So go check out Sweatblock. It's doctor created, doctor recommended, works for up to 7 days per use. You get a dry shirt guarantee from Sweatblock. If it doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. So you have nothing to lose with this. Go check it out, sweatblock.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDON to get 20% off. They're also available at CVS and on Amazon. Also want to tell you about Theragun. Don't let the stress of daily life weigh down on your body. I know that I sit here and I stress and I sit in my chair for like 10, 12 hours a day, and all of a sudden I'm stressing out. I need something to work my legs and to be the thing that doesn't just make me feel good. It gets to the source of the pain by releasing tension. That's what Theragun can do for you. Some of our hosts swear by it. Adam Mares, my co-host on Locked On NBA on Fridays, he has one of these and said it would be the one item that he would go grab and take from his house in the case of a house fire. He loves the Theragun so much. Try Theragun for 30 days, starting at only $199. Go to theragun.com/lockedon right now and get your Gen 4 Theragun today. That's therabody.com/lockedon. THERABODY.com/lockedon to get your Theragun starting at only $199. Go get it today. All right, Isaac Harris, let's get into some more about this.
What if?
About Kristaps Porzingis. So if he doesn't get traded, we went down the Harrison Barnes route. He basically got traded for nothing. You mentioned the cap space before. There would have been so many possibilities for the Mavericks to get, to use that cap space. But I kind of wonder if they would have just kept him at that point and used him and added assets to him as a piece to make a trade around. Maybe a bunch of teams weren't necessarily interested in him, but I think he could have been a centerpiece or a player that matched the salary to be able to send out to one of these teams. But anyway, either way. Well, they could have just kept him as a player as well, because if you don't have Porzingis and then you're not trying to share shots with a bunch of people, and then there's just all kinds of different what ifs in this.
Yeah, he would have been an expiring contract. So, that next season at $24 million. Well, I say expiring. That's not true. He had a player option that following season because that's when he declined it, signed the extension, with the Kings at that point. But let's just play out the rest of that season going into the summer real quick. They went 8-20 over those remaining 28 games after the Harrison Barnes trade. So let's just say,
which was after the Porzingis trade as well, when he didn't play and all that.
Exactly. They didn't, the pick was top 5 protected. So I don't think, even if they don't make the Porzingis trade, I don't think they're going to be so bad that, they only won 8 more games the rest of the season. Okay. So I don't think they're going to be so much worse that they're going to land in the top 5 of the draft. So let's just assume they still land in the same.
The thing about that, though, is they were like one lottery ball from doing what the Pelicans did and going up and getting Zion too. So there's a lot of what ifs in that scenario as well.
That's true. So they could have, there's a world that they lose a few more games. They land in the top 5. There's another draft pick. But this case, they win
one more game, and they're where the Pelicans are. If the lottery balls would have stayed the same,
true, yeah. So that didn't happen. The pick goes to the Hawks, Cam Reddish basically, and then it's the summer. What actually happened is they chased Kemba Walker, and we've said this so many times, and I don't want to go down this route a ton, but you talk to the right people, and there was a lot of confidence in Kemba Walker coming to Dallas, and if you go back and play that timeline in 2019, how Boston came out of nowhere because Horford decides to take this. Philly came out of nowhere for a crazy deal to Horford. Horford opts out, which no one thought Horford was going to opt out in Boston, opts out to take this crazy deal in Philly, and then bam, they work out, the Kemba. They swoop in and get Kemba. In hindsight, you're like, hey, well, I guess it worked out.
It's another Darren Williams, Dwight Howard, like another one of those a little bit because of what his value has turned into.
But for them that summer, they didn't have Maxey under contract, Dorian under contract, Seth Curry, Boban, all of these guys they signed later on in free agency. You still had their rights. They were restricted free agents like Maxey and Dorian was. That's why there are a lot of complaints because Dallas didn't use the cap space and then go over it to sign Maxey and Dorian.
Was that a big deal?
But it just goes to show you that you're basically looking at if the KP trade doesn't happen, you're going into that summer without the draft pick. Let's just say they still lost the draft pick with Luka, Dennis Smith Jr., like Dwight Powell, and then a ton of cap space. So what do they do at the cap space at that point? Does Kemba still does he come? Probably not. He probably still goes to Boston. And then you're looking at names like Tobias. Do they overpay for Al Horford because they have so much money? They're like, hey, let's go and get two guys, and we have to overpay for a Horford and a Tobias or something like that. That's the route where your head just goes crazy because they would have had to sign someone. They had to fill out a roster, but where do they spend the money?
Yeah, so I started looking up and seeing, okay, money and then also trades. Could they have also made a trade with the picks that they had as well? So you start going down that rabbit trail. You mentioned Tobias Harris. He was traded. He was kind of the only other decent player traded at the deadline, like decent to good player that was traded at the deadline in 2019 after Porzingis was traded. So if the Mavericks didn't make that trade, then all of a sudden they're poised to make a trade to the Clippers for Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris, this is the trade, by the way. Tobias Harris, Boban, and Mike Scott. And then the Clippers received Wilson Chandler, Muscala, Landry Shamet, a first-round pick that's lottery protected in 2020, a 2021 first-round pick, unprotected from Miami, and then a couple seconds. So they could have done that deal. Ended up with Boban early. There's an interesting one. What if the Mavericks didn't trade for Porzingis? Maybe they get Boban a year early. How about
You're talking that same week, the same week of the Harrison Barnes trade.
The exact same week that they made the HB trade, Tobias got traded to Philadelphia.
And that's what we don't know either. Like how much of the KP trade happened because of them they wanted to have a second, or the opportunity happened and they're like, we can't pass this up, basically.
Which they couldn't. I mean,
exactly.
They were right to do it.
They swung for it, and we've talked about this before. Like when you have a young generational talent and you can swing to land the secondary, co-star, you have to swing. You got to do it, and they did that. And jury's still out. Let's just leave it at that. But would they have swung for someone else before the deadline? I just don't think they would have, just because they had lost so much that season already, that I think that they would have just kept on losing. They only won 33 games that season. So even if they got Tobias, where is that getting them? I just don't know. And because he's going to be a free agent that coming summer. So you trade for him, you suck, and then he could just leave for nothing.
So here are the other moves that the other players that moved around the draft and free agency that got traded that the Mavs could have also gone after. Jimmy Butler was traded at the draft in that 14 deal from Philadelphia to Miami.
Yeah.
In that deal. So that one was an interesting one. That Josh Richardson was in that deal from Miami to Philadelphia. Mike Conley was traded to Utah for a couple of players like Jay Crowder, Grayson Allen, and a highly protected first-round pick. Could they have gotten in on Mike Conley then? Could they have sent a pick or maybe two, first-round picks to get Mike Conley? Malcolm Brogdon was traded to Indiana from Milwaukee in a sign and trade. Remember at that time we were like the Mavericks couldn't match it because they didn't have first round picks to spend. But if they didn't do the Porzingis trade, they could have gotten Malcolm Brogdon then at that time.
Jimmy's a what if too, because he was a free agent. So that deal was a sign and trade deal too. So could you have convinced Jimmy to come if you had roughly 60 million cap space if you could get someone else to come with it?
We mentioned the Kemba Walker trade already. Durant went to the Nets. That was technically a trade. The Durant-Kyrie thing, the Mavs would have had enough cap space to just sign those guys. Maybe that would have been a thing. I think they wanted to live in Brooklyn, but
probably.
Jeremy Grant was traded for a first-round pick. Maybe the Mavericks tried that route and they go, okay, well, we don't want Harrison Barnes anymore. Let's just bring in the younger Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Grant. They tried that route. This was the in free agency, so a couple weeks after the draft in 2019 was the Paul George trade, which this trade, if you go back at this trade, the Mavs couldn't have even matched this trade. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Gallinari, 5 first-round picks. So not all of them are OKC. Or not all of them are the Clippers. So like I think 2 or 3 of them are the Clippers, and then 2 of them were picks that they got from somebody else, and then 2 pick swaps. So that's a massive trade. The other trade that went down was the Westbrook for CP3 swap during that time. Could the Mavericks have come in and gotten Chris Paul? Like, hey, we need to pair, Luka with this guy. We have the space for it. We have it. We might as well do it. We talked about the Mavericks doing that anyway. Even with Porzingis, we talked about them doing a deal like that. And then the last one, that's a huge what if for me. That was the summer that Anthony Davis got traded to the Lakers. And you say, well, they had all those players and all that stuff, but the Mavericks could have matched all the picks at least.
Yeah.
They could have sent, Brunson. They could have sent a bunch of random stuff. They could have matched all the picks. And potentially their pick may have been better because the Lakers got that 4th pick that ended up being Garland or DeAndre Hunter in that trade. The Mavericks could have potentially gotten a better pick and sent that pick along. I mean, there's just so many what ifs. I don't think they would have gotten Anthony Davis, but it comes up in the possibilities of, if there's a multiverse of, does it happen 1 out of like a million times? Maybe.
Well, AD wanted to go LA, and they
For
got
sure.
Brandon Ingram and Lonzo.
Yeah.
They got a bunch of young
Josh
good
Hart.
players. Yeah.
They got a lot for Anthony Davis. Like I'm looking at some of these deals, like the Paul George deal, they got a lot. Anthony Davis, the Pelicans got a lot.
And they just lost Lonzo for nothing.
Yeah, and then in the Jimmy Butler stuff, like they did not get a lot for Jimmy Butler. Like Philly got Josh Richardson, and that's kind of it for Jimmy Butler. It's pretty wild. It really depends. And then the Knicks didn't get a ton for Porzingis. They got Dennis Smith Jr., who we'll talk about in a minute, and then those 2 picks that turned into what? Like the Knicks getting this. They didn't get a ton. So, all right, coming up, let's get into some of these other what ifs. We got to talk about Tim Hardaway Jr. Got to talk about Dennis Smith Jr. And then the draft. What happens in the draft if the Mavericks keep the picks? Who do they get with the picks that they kept instead of sending them for Kristaps Porzingis? We'll get into that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Built Bar. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. They're absolutely delicious. Go check them out. They got some new flavors that they're throwing out there right now. Coconut almond, a good one. Peanut butter brownie. People love peanut butter brownie. That one has 180 calories, 19 grams of protein, 5 grams of sugar. They're perfect just to tide you over for a meal. You can carry them with you. They're not great in the Texas heat. Don't leave them out in your car. I will tell you that. I will warn you about that. But keep them with you. Keep them in the fridge. They're pretty good in the fridge as well. It's a protein bar you're actually going to want to eat, and it will actually help you and give you some benefits and all that stuff. So go to Built.com. Check out all their other options as well. Built Boost, Built Bites, Built Broth, all kinds of other things for you. And use that promo code LOCKS15 to get 15% off at Built.com. Also, betonline.ag, the one-stop shop for all your betting needs. If you want to bet on some MLB action, bet on some NBA futures. The championship odds right now, where do you think the Mavericks land right now? The championship odds according to betonline.ag.
6th.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10th.
Oh.
They're plus 2,200, so plus 2,200. Same odds as the Heat, just under the Nuggets. The Jazz, the Suns, the Sixers, the Clippers, the Warriors, the Bucks, the Lakers, and the Nets are all above them. The Clippers seems a little high. Clippers same odds as the Sixers and Suns, above the Jazz. That one's interesting. Warriors way ahead. That one makes sense because just the money will go there. But if you feel good about the Mavericks championship odds, go ahead and go bet $100 on the Mavericks to win the championship. If they do win the championship, you'll get $2,200. Feels pretty good. Also, if you want to get a 50% welcome bonus, use the promo code LOCKEDON. Get extra money you want to put down. Bet online, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Isaac Harris, let's get into some more.
What
if? Okay, let's do Dennis Smith Jr. because we haven't talked about him a lot yet. When we were trying to plan this, we were thinking about, okay, what are the topics we want to go into? Dennis Smith Jr. is such an interesting what if because his trade value is declining. Because of Luka.
Yeah.
He was getting the ball less. The offense was not built around him anymore. And we forget, just because of where Dennis Smith Jr. is now compared to where he was, like his rookie year, he was 15 points a game, 5 assists, about 4 rebounds, and like his 3-point shot was getting better. That was the big question for him, is can his jumper be good enough? And he had some moments. Remember, he had that block on Tobias Harris that was like that crazy game-winning block. Like he had some moments as well in the NBA. And he was playing games. He wasn't hurt a lot either. And so we kind of forget just that he was decent, had some value at the time, but it was rapidly declining because of Luka. So if the Mavericks had waited any more time, would he even be like a valuable asset to send to another team? That's an interesting one for the Mavericks. But for Dennis Smith Jr., there's even more.
Yeah, that's they capitalized on his value at the highest they could have, because of the timeline. Without Dennis Smith Jr., are you getting KP? I mean, maybe. I don't know. It feels like, they wanted the cap space. That was the biggest thing because they got the expirings of Wes and DeAndre, and they got off the money of Tim. But how much was hey, you get a top 10 pick, less than 2 years ago, and Dennis Smith Jr. also in this deal, and they trade him. It obviously hasn't worked out. He's a free agent right now, hasn't signed anywhere.
We always hear these wish lists from these GMs that say, okay, well, I want a young player and first round pick, or a young player. And so you have to almost check the boxes in some of these trades, and I think Dennis Smith Jr. at least just enough check that young player box.
Exactly. It freed up cap space. They got first round picks. They got a young prospect. So they checked off a lot of the boxes in that trade. For Dennis, it was just a matter of time. He was going to be gone.
From the Mavericks.
We don't want to revisit everything of how that his last how that ended in Dallas. But it was just a matter of time. If he didn't get traded for KP, would he have been gone by the deadline? Possibly. I wouldn't have been shocked somewhere else. But your back's hurting.
Yeah, sorry, my back hurts.
Okay. If you need some time off, let me know. And
no,
if he's not traded by the deadline, then he's getting traded in the offseason. But what are you getting for him in the offseason? That's 28 more games of Dennis playing with Luka that he could look even worse. That you're there was still at least a little bit of intrigue with Dennis of him getting traded to New York. Hey, let's just get him out of the scene. That would have probably been there in the summer, but it might not have been, and his value might have been worse. So in a way, Dallas capitalized by sending him in that deal.
Yeah, I think you send him and a first round pick to the Bucks for Malcolm Brogdon, right? I think you do that later.
Yeah, and you've been talking about their picks. Remember, they would have all of their picks. So let's just say they go into that summer. They don't do the KP trade.
They wouldn't have the 2019 pick, the one that became Cam Reddish, because that one's to Atlanta. So that was in the Luka deal.
Exactly.
So they don't have that one. But
let's just say the KP trade doesn't happen. The draft pick goes to Atlanta for Cam Reddish. They go into that summer with all that cap space.
Yeah, well, it may not have, because the Mavericks may have been worse if they didn't get Tim Hardaway and all that. But let's assume,
let's just assume it still goes to Atlanta. They go into that summer, and let's just assume that they don't land any major needle mover type of player. Okay. Maybe they kept Harrison Barnes, and that's some of your cap space too. They add somebody else, and it doesn't really help them a ton because they play that next season and they finish with the 18th overall pick, which ends up being Josh Green. They go to the playoff. They face the Clippers in the bubble. They probably don't even make the playoffs. Possibly. Without KP, without Tim Hardaway Jr., it all depends on who else they would have gotten in the offseason. But there's a world in which they don't make the playoffs. So now you're not making the playoffs in the first 3 seasons.
The Mavericks were 8 games better than the Blazers that year. So I think maybe they would have made the playoffs still. They may have just been better than the Blazers and still made it. Same spot.
So, but let's say they don't have that good of a record that they finished with at 18. Let's just say it was worse.
Yeah.
Now they're higher in the draft pick. They're higher in the draft, in Josh Green's draft. Does that allow them to get Tyrese Halliburton, who went 12th overall, 11th overall to Sacramento, 12th overall. So if they were worse, they might miss the playoffs. But then you're getting your guy in Tyrese Halliburton, which we know they were very interested in. They tried to move up for in that draft. So then you're looking at saying, all right, we have all these draft picks. We have Jalen Brunson with Luka, Tyrese Halliburton. Dennis is probably gone at that point. And then you have the makings of pieces with saying, okay, we have a young player in Halliburton. We have all of our draft picks in the future. Now can we go get someone else too? Harrison Barnes on an expiring contract if you kept him at $24 million. So then you have another like bigger type Porzingis type of package that you could go out and try to get another big, try to go get your second star for Luka at that point with an expiring of Harrison, Tyrese Halliburton, and first round pick. Somebody's like listening to this right now saying, what did they just piece all together? This is how our brains work, people.
We went backwards and then we went into the future as well. There's another scenario where the Mavericks are just bad enough because they didn't get Tim, they didn't get usable players, they sent away Harrison Barnes. That in that 2019 draft they get Zion. I'm going that direction. That they're just bad enough. The lottery odds, because all of a sudden it's what if? It's a different scenario. They didn't trade for Porzingis, so all of a sudden the lottery odds may be different. Yeah. The balls bounce the right way for the Mavericks. You get Zion and Luka.
I mean, that would have been.
Then what? Then what if? Like,
what if
Zion and Luka were playing together?
That's a whole separate pod.
But it's fun.
It is, yeah. It is a lot of fun. Even if they landed, 2 or 3 in that draft.
You have Zion, Luka, and cap space still to work with.
Yeah,
because they're both on rookie deals. You have nobody else making any significant money besides like Dwight Powell.
That is pretty crazy.
Because you didn't make the trade for Porzingis. So you don't have Porzingis, who immediately got that extension, plus Tim Hardaway Jr., who was at that time, quote unquote, the tax for Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, and I want to say this too. I think some people could be listening to this saying, well, that's what Dallas should have done. Look, they could have gotten a higher draft pick. If they just sucked another year. I am not
saying this after hearing these options.
I know you're not saying this, but I think there's probably some listeners saying, well, that's what they should have done. They should have sucked another year, had the draft pick been a little higher. They could have kept their pieces, traded for a guy who wasn't, there was no injury, question mark around. No, you have to swing for it. Like, you have a generational star in Luka, and you had a chance to go get another generational type of star. He was an all-star right before he tore his ACL that season. He was an incredible young player. It's like you have to swing for it at that point, and they swung for it, and they put all their pieces in that deal as far as a couple first and stuff. So they had to make that trade because there's a world that if they didn't make that trade and they don't land Tim and KP and all those guys, what if they do miss the playoffs and they're not playing the Clippers in the bubble? Now you're looking at a young Luka Doncic saying, hey, you're great, but we're not good enough to even make the playoffs. And it's like, well, are you making the playoffs the year after that? You would assume so, but this is something too where you've at least been able to say, hey, we've made the playoffs the past 2 years with Luka right now, saying we played the Clippers twice, but at least we been there. You've tasted that. We know what we need to do. Like, there's still, I don't want us to take this pod and saying, oh, they shouldn't have traded for KP, because that's not the case. That's not what either one of us is saying. Like, you make that trade hands down, especially for what you had to give up. Yeah.
We can't play the game well. This front office never does anything, and they don't spend the cap space. They save up all this cap space. So then in one of these scenarios, they save up all the cap space. Like, literally have so much cap space, more than any team could know what to do with. And we're like, okay, well, would they actually do anything? Would a free agent actually come to the Mavericks?
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't lay out a lot of free agency stuff. I just laid out mostly trades in this. And so we can't play the game of, well, this front office never does anything. And yet they shouldn't have traded for Porzingis, because then they would have had all these options to do things that they wouldn't have done, right? Like, does Rick Carlisle and Donnie Nelson stay if they don't trade for Porzingis? I feel like Donnie might be out earlier.
Donnie would have swung for something else. Like, that's the hardest thing to predict about this, because it's not like, hey, if you didn't get KP, we would have this same roster now. That's not the case.
I think he was waiting for the right thing, and I think he thought the Porzingis thing was the right thing to swing on. And I don't know if he would have just swung on anything. That hasn't been the case that moment, for them.
Maybe in the offseason, but I think Luka does add a pressure. Like, I don't think we're looking at it right now, him still haven't swung for anything.
How many years did we ask them to just swing on, even just little stuff? Like, how many flyers did we ask for over the years of doing this podcast for Donnie Nelson? Like, hey, just swing on this flyer, swing on this guy, swing on, try this. And they don't. They just did it. They were waiting for the right pieces, the right stuff. They wanted the right role players and all that. And it just seemed like, I think he would have just waited until his demise. I think he would have gotten fired earlier, to be honest.
He could have. And I think the same result probably happens for Rick. in the same type of time.
See, I think the opposite for Rick, because I think Luka would have been less frustrated because they wouldn't have been winning. And so he wouldn't be as frustrated with all that because we don't have the talent. He would have been more frustrated at the front office than
I think
coaching.
he would just be pissed at everyone at that point.
Just maybe he would just be pissed at everyone.
What are the odds they start the 2019-20 season with a lineup of Luka, Dennis, Dorian, Harrison Barnes, and Vucevic?
Oh, Vooch?
Because I feel like Vooch is the natural guy that like they would have landed him in 2019.
And done that trade instead of the Bulls.
Yeah,
or somebody.
well, and like you sign it because he signed like a 4-year, $100 million deal with Orlando, and it's like, all right, Vooch. They kept Harrison Barnes on expiring. If they didn't trade Dennis, Dorian.
Some people would say, well, the Vooch trade would have made him a lot better because Vooch rebounds. He can do other things Porzingis can't. Vooch doesn't show up in the playoffs either. Right? Like, let's be real about Nikola Vucevic. Like, he definitely has some positives. He's better at than Porzingis at some things, but he's also been a no-show at times in the playoffs as well.
That's very true. Okay, real quick, Tim Hardaway Jr.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay. So he never gets traded to the Mavericks. Does he
Yeah.
ever get traded? Because he was a sunken cost at that point. So then my question is does he get this second deal like he did?
Mm-mm.
I don't think so. I think his life is completely different if this trade doesn't go down.
He's viewed like a Dion Waiters if he doesn't get traded to Dallas and he
Maybe not
fits
that
in-
bad, but yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe not that bad, but I don't think he's getting another $72 million deal if he doesn't get traded to Dallas.
The Dion Waiters is interesting because you remember that I always think about him and Tim Hardaway Jr. in that Rising Stars game, the
was a lot
rookie
of
versus
fun.
sophomore game, where they were just trading buckets. Go look that up on YouTube. Tim Hardaway Jr. versus Dion Waiters trading buckets, and just them just going back and forth and trading 3-pointer for 3-pointer, and just the different direction their career went. Where Dion Waiters was, better earlier, I think, and was seen as like, okay, he could be the sixth man on Cleveland, and then all of a sudden he gets traded to OKC. Then Miami picks him up, like, all right, we're going to try him. The Miami Heat culture is going to turn it around for him. They give him this big deal, and then he has a couple of years, and now he's just out of the league. Like, you just can't find any time. So you wonder if Tim Hardaway Jr. would have gone down that type of path instead of Waiters.
That's true. That's true. I mean, he would have finished out his contract in New York. Maybe they traded him. Maybe they traded him as an expiring or something like that. But it's wild, man. There's so many what ifs with the KP trade and how it would have affected everything and how many things would have stayed the same. Like I don't think it affected Dennis's future that much. Like Dennis's future was not going to be in Dallas. He would have been traded either way. Harrison Barnes, he probably wasn't going to stay in Dallas for his whole career too. I think the biggest what if out of this what if is if it's not KP they trade for, who is the name they trade for? Who is the big guy? Because they're not going between the KP trade in 2019 until this moment in August 2021 without trading for another high impact, like second star type of player.
With all the guys that moved over the last couple of years.
Exactly. With all the guys, and they would have had all their draft picks. They would have had, who would they have cashed in or tried to push all their chips in for? And that's the question, and we'll never know.
We'll never know, but we love the
what if
all the time. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.